Hey, welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to cover how you prioritize what features you build into your product. This is so you avoid those dreaded scenarios of spending a ton of time and end up building something your customer hates, or shipping your product too late for the market. This episode is both for new product managers looking to see why prioritization is important, as well as for experienced product managers looking to add a new tool to their arsenal. In this video, I'm going to cover three things. I'm going to cover why it's important for you to prioritize your product. I'm going to show you some of my top frameworks and ways that I prioritize products every day. And we're going to cover a few real examples so you can see how it's done. Now, this is a calorie-dense how-to episode where we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, the bread and butter, some other food analogy of product management, so buckle up. Hi, I'm Garrett Risco, and welcome to the channel Risky Business, where I show you what tactics product managers use behind the scenes to build the best products out there. So why do we even care about prioritization? Why can't we just go with our gut and build what we think is best? Well, this gut just ate a week-old Euro platter, so we already know it's not making smart decisions. But seriously, without backing up what we want to build with data, how do you know that you're building the right thing? Is it going to do well for 90% of your customers or 2% of your customers? Is this feature going to cause your product to grow, or is it more for retaining users, and how many users? And how do you know that you can build a minimum viable product in time and not 10 years from now? The answer to all these questions is prioritization. Prioritization is a tool set you use to decide what to build, why, and when. The excellent author Greg McKeown wrote about priorities in his book Essentialism, which, by the way, it's phenomenal. You all should read it, and it's going to be linked down below. And he said the word priorities didn't even exist as a word until about 100 years ago. It used to be priority, just one, the one most important thing you need to do. Now the word priorities has just been watered down. Building your products is about doing less, not more. A product manager that tries to squeeze in everything results in more commitments, more stress, poor quality work, and a product that doesn't sell. So be selective, build the best version of your product, and be a fiend at prioritizing the few excellent things that make it into what you ship. So there's a slew of methods to do this, but I'm just going to cover three frameworks that I use day to day, specifically the value effort matrix, the Kano model, and the RICE method. The value effort matrix is probably one of the ones you're most familiar with, whether you know its name or not. It's one of the most popular, one of the easiest ones to use, and one of the quickest ways to prioritize your product features. PMs love this one because you can come to a data-driven decision pretty quickly, and it fairly well insulates against some of those bad actors, typically leaders, that might steer the product in the wrong direction using either their leadership or their seniority. It can also help avoid using the wrong tools or technology, which might add to your engineering effort. Now, there's a lot that goes into the value, much of which I'm going to cover in a future video more in depth, but at a high level, there's 6 things I want you to take away. There's the acquisition, or will this feature help me gain new customers? There's activation, or when will these customers understand the value of this feature? There's reach, which is how many customers are impacted by this feature. There's revenue, or how will this feature help me make money? There's retention, or how can I keep my customers engaged and driven to use my product? And then there's vitality, which is how does this feature drive product life? So for this example, we're going to make up a theoretical product. It's going to be Google Maps for university students. So this is to help university students navigate where they're going on campus, and maybe to figure out what classes they have coming up next. It's going to be a theoretical application that we can use this impact and frequency analysis and then turn it into a value effort matrix. So you'll see I mapped impact on the y-axis and frequency on the x-axis. And typically you want to look at this in quadrants, whereas the top right is much more valuable and the bottom left is less valuable. So we're going to plot a couple different features on this matrix pulled from our backlog. Let's say the first one is when is the building open or closed? It's probably very high impact. People are going to be using it all the time. When is my classroom open? When is the building open? When is it closed? So the next feature we're going to pull from the backlog is when are doors open versus when are they locked? For some of those 24-hour access buildings, and in which buildings might be open for me. All right, so the next feature we're going to pull from the backlog is a classroom mapping feature. Similar to how you might go to a mall, you can see which retail establishments are on what floor. This would show you where your underwater basket weaving course is at. The next prioritized feature is going to show the location of bike lockups on the map, and it's going to show them by quality. So there might be some basic, just lock your bike up to a metal grate kind of lockup. There will be lockups with a surveillance camera as a tier better, and then maybe the last one would be a lockup with a storage unit. And the last feature we're going to prioritize is a personal secretary or personal assistant. It's what you're probably most used to when you go driving, and it's like, hey, it's time for you to head to the airport now, so you make it on time. All right, it's now time for you to wake up and roll out of bed so you can make it to your next class, either by foot or by bike. Very high impact and medium frequency. The next thing you want to do is you want to assign a unique value to each one of these features from highest to lowest. The highest value would be ones that have the most impact on high frequency, and lowest would be use the least and have the least value to your customers. We're going to map it out with the building times, rooms, personal assistant, bikes, and doors in order of priority. So next we're going to take those features that we just mapped from our impact and frequency analysis and plot them on a value effort matrix. So on the y-axis we have value, and on the x-axis we have effort. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to map each of those in order of importance in this matrix. Again, we're going to split it into quadrants, and I'll show you why at the end. Now this is assuming we met with each of our engineering teams and assigned each one of these kind of a t-shirt size amount of work, either in story points or days or something like that. Now the first thing I want to map on this matrix is when is the building open versus when is it closed. Obviously this is really high value for our end users, and our engineering team came back and they said it was low effort to implement. The next feature I want to prioritize is my Harry Potter Marauders map feature. That's going to show me where all the rooms are located on each floor within a building. Our engineering team came back and they said it was quite a bit more effort, and it's still decently high value. The next feature we want to prioritize is that personal assistant or personal secretary. That's going to let me know when to get my butt out of bed to make it to class. The engineering team came back and they said it was a very high effort to implement, gathering all that metadata and making this assessment. So we're going to mark it as medium value but high effort. The next feature we're prioritizing is the bike lockup feature. That's going to show me on the map where the best bike lockups are by how secure that they are. The engineering team came back, they said it was still a good amount of effort to create this, maybe as a medium t-shirt size or so, and it provides decent impact for the end customer. And the very last feature that we're prioritizing is the one that shows you which doors are locked and by when. It is the lowest value of all of them, and it's also pretty low effort to implement as well. And here you can see why everybody likes the value effort matrix. In just a quick 5 minutes, I've already taken a data-driven approach to see which features to build and by when, and it's ordered by top left, top right, bottom right, which basically tells me I've got low-hanging fruit at high impact and low effort at the top left, more visionary and hard to build features at the top right. I've got some easier but lower impact features at the bottom left, and at the bottom right quadrant are things I probably shouldn't build because they're too much work. So effort, which is just another way of saying investment, isn't just engineering time. It's everyone that's involved. So it's dev, DevOps, and back office workers as well. And it's not just a measurement of time, it's also a measurement of money and business risk and complexity. So for our Marauders map app for university students, we can see just how these features stack up, with effort being measured as t-shirt sizings in a small, medium, large, maybe even extra large, and value being measured in a star ranking, 1 to 5 stars, 5 being the best. So what are some pros and cons of this value effort matrix? I had actually mentioned one earlier, which is it's really quick and really easy for teams to immediately get aligned and put to paper what they think the value is for each of these features. It's also excellent for small teams that don't have the luxury of spending a lot of time on an in-depth analysis. Now it's somewhat data-driven, but it certainly leaves a little bit of room for cognitive bias. Estimates can be overinflated or not estimated correctly. Also, one of the downsides of this framework is it doesn't work really well in a large audience because there's going to be a lot of people trying to come to consensus and arguing pros and cons of each of the features, and it kind of loses the value of why you're using this framework in the first place. The second framework I want to cover is the Kano model. This is probably one you've heard of but didn't necessarily know the name of it. It was created by the legendary Noriaki Kano back in the 80s, and like anything 80s, retro revivalism is real and it's back in a big way like shoulder pad blazers. Now for me, I don't really use the Kano model to its fullest in my day-to-day because it can be really time-consuming measuring completeness versus customer value. To build out the full model, you have to gather information through tons of customer surveys, and the customers might not even fully understand the features that you're trying to ask them about. Now for me, I prefer to use the concepts of the Kano model to tag each of my features, similar to the Moscow method where they have must have, could have, should have, and won't have. And this works as an excellent litmus test to see if you're ready to ship your product. So the Kano model is broken down into 5 categories: dissatisfiers, satisfiers, delighters, unimportant, and undesired. Now, dissatisfiers aren't exactly what you might think. You're not going into your product and adding things that dissatisfy your customer. It's more that your customer was expecting a feature that just wasn't even there. Like in a car example, your customer bought a car and the steering wheel wasn't even there, or the brakes was missing. And your customers aren't like, whoa, I wasn't checking for a list of features and looking for steering wheel or brakes. I was just expecting them to be in the product. Dissatisfiers are more commonly known as table stakes or must-haves. Now, satisfiers, more commonly known as nice-to-have or value-added features, linearly increase the value of the product the more that you add. So for example, in that car example, when you add a sunroof, it's worth a little bit more money. When you add your second cup holder, it's worth a little bit more, and so on. Now, delighters, also sometimes called differentiators or aha moments or magic moments, these are the truly different features in your product that no other competition has. Your customers might not even known that they wanted this thing, and now that they have it, they're like, I'm never going back to one of those old products. This is like the car can fly, or the car has gull-wing doors, or autonomous driving. Customers are like, if my car doesn't drive me around while I'm binge watching Netflix, I don't want it. Okay, no, really don't do that. Now, I'm going to get to undesired and unimportant features in a bit, not because they are unimportant themselves, but because they need their own amount of time to talk about. Now, unfortunately, as you probably already know, with all things product, features lose their value over time. Those delighters or those differentiators eventually become value-added features, and those value-added features unfortunately become table stakes. Now go into the way back machine back to 2008 and imagine buying a Range Rover and being shocked at the visibility that you would get out of a backup camera. Certainly much better than your 10% tint that you'd have in your rearview window. Then over time, Beamers got backup cameras and Lexus got backup cameras, and today you would be shocked if you went out and bought a Ford Dart and it didn't have a backup camera. Now the good news is it keeps us PMs gainfully employed, and it keeps companies from resting on their laurels. You or your company failing to evolve just opens the doors to being overtaken by innovative new companies and products. Now, dissatisfiers or table stakes features are often overlooked by product managers and designers just because they think they're boring. No one wants to work on a snooze fest feature that's become table stakes. But sometimes in those otherwise boring features lies a twist in it that could upend the whole market. For example, product managers of the Honda E took what are otherwise bog standard features, differentiated them, and niched down hard in their market. So what is the Honda E? Well, it's a brand new electric car that was released this year, and they designed it from the ground up to be an urban vehicle that maximizes maneuverability. Everything from the side view mirrors that were removed and replaced with side view cameras, to the rear view mirror that was replaced with a rear view camera, to the frameless doors, all these normally table stakes features were rethought for an urban navigatable environment, perfect for regions like Europe or Japan. But which reimagined feature really stood out from the product team? It's, get this, the car's turning radius. Product managers at Honda realized that urban drivability was the North Star for the Honda E, and an extension of that is the ability to navigate tight spaces that you might find on the canals of Amsterdam or the streets of Shinagawa, Tokyo. They achieved a 4.3 meter turning radius, which is unheard of because the car is only about 4 meters long. And this is in comparison to the Smart Fortwo's turning radius of about 6.95 meters, a London Taxi with about 8.45 meters, and its direct competitor, the Nissan Leaf, at 11 meter turning radius. So this is a perfect example of taking a normally snooze fest, table stakes, boring feature and turning it into a differentiator. Those satisfiers that I mentioned earlier, sometimes also known as value add or nice to haves, they usually linearly increase the value of your product the more that you add. Typically, each one of these that you add to your product lets you charge more for it, like that second trunk or front trunk or frunk. Okay, some of these might actually reduce the value of your product. But more often, actually, these value adds should be tied to the brand motto of your product. Some brand mottos could be quality, some brand mottos could be cost, some could be the best product for the price, i.e. Thrifty. For example, I'm a huge fan of Lululemon clothing, and I mean, this video is not sponsored by them, but hey, I'm always ready to talk deals. And their brand motto from the second you step in the store is quality. Before you even look at the products, the building just exudes quality. From the reclaimed wood facades, to the hairlight accents, to the silk potted plants, to the big bright windows that give the place an outdoor airy feel. And then the products themselves feel like high quality, from the stitching on the hem, to the thickness of the fabric, to the soft or rippled texture on each item. Heck, even the people working there look like models, like they just walked out of their Wednesday night Bikram yoga class. And they know the more satisfiers that they add in that entire experience, the more they can charge for each of their products. So a good rule of thumb is before you even ship, your product must have at least one differentiator or delighter and ideally a steady stream of them. An easy one, and usually your first delighter, is just people unboxing your product. Now I mentioned 2 other categories in the Kano model titled unimportant and undesired, and they are anything but. Well, undesired features is just a fancy way of saying bugs, and you should get rid of those. While unimportant features that are already built into your product are very nefarious because they add that cruft and bloat to your product. They're all the edge case features that can turn your lean product into a big, bloated Microsoft Word-esque behemoth that you'll be spending more time doing regression testing than you will be adding differentiators to. Every extra unimportant feature requires testing, maintenance, bug fixes, and documentation. This principle I'm sure many of you have heard of before. It's the Pareto principle, sometimes called the 80-20 rule or the power law. It basically states that 80% of your users' time is spent on 20% of your features. This means the bulk of your product is being updated and documented and maintained for the few users that use it. So as a product manager, it's extra important to be a grim reaper on these unimportant features and kill them off judiciously. And the third and final framework that I'm going to go over, which is my personal favorite, is the RICE method. It's a more evolved version of the value effort matrix, and while it's a bit more time consuming, it addresses almost all the downsides of the other frameworks. And RICE, while not to be confused for the food staple, is an acronym for reach, impact, confidence, and effort. So reach, like the frequency that I mentioned earlier, is used to measure how much or how often over a certain time frame, like transactions per second or renders per week or users per month. An impact is an overall measure of the value to the end user. This is exactly the value that I had mentioned earlier, and it's a composite of many different things. And it's a bit more subjective, but it's graded on a scale of 3 to 0.25, 3 which is the greatest impact, 2 which is even less, 1 is average impact, and 0.25 which is very minimal impact. Confidence is a measure of how confident you are in both your reach and your impact score. Generally, it's scored as a percentage where 100% is very confident, 80% is medium confidence, and 50% is low confidence. An effort, similarly to before, is a measure of how much effort per person per month, and the unit is 1 man month. So to calculate a feature score, higher is better, lower is worse. It's super easy. You just take R, you multiply it by I, you multiply it by C, you take all that, you divide by E. So the framework that you choose is just that. It's just a framework. It should not be replaced in collaboration, other inputs, and it certainly shouldn't be the silver bullet for you to choose every product feature. It's mainly a way to get folks on the same page of what to build, by when, and of what relative importance. The framework is a data-driven way for getting out of the storming and forming phase and into building your product. And as Greg McKeown rightly says, focus on the priority and not the priorities. It's about doing less and not more. So get out there, be selective, and build that next phenomenal product. And in proper YouTube fashion, make sure to like the video, hit the subscribe button, and comment down below with any questions you want me to answer. Hit the bell to follow and get notified of videos just like this, where I break down PM best practices, day-to-day ways to excel on the role, and some behind-the-scenes secrets on how some product managers build some of the best products out there. Stay tuned next week for another episode, well, hopefully next week. Thanks so much for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next time.